So, the dark web. It's a term that, well, tends to conjure up all sorts of dramatic images, doesn't it? Secret marketplaces, hackers in hoodies, that kind of thing. But let's start by breaking it down properly, because there's so much misunderstanding here.
Oh, absolutely. It seems like every mention of the dark web instantly sends people into panic mode. But there's a lot more to it than just the scary stuff.
Exactly. First up, let's clear up a term that often gets people confused. The deep web. You see, the deep web includes all the parts of the internet that aren't indexed by search engines. So, think online banking portals or private company databases. Stuff that's entirely legitimate, yet not publicly searchable.
And that's where people mix it up with the dark web, right? They're not the same at all.
Right, the dark web is actually a much smaller subsection of the deep web. It's a place that requires special software to access, like Tor or I2P. Now, the term dark web itself popped up around 2009, but before then this space was just kind of there, unnamed, and, well, mysterious.
Okay, hang on. How does Tor even work? I mean, it sounds so abstract to someone who's not, tech savvy.
Good question. Tor stands for the onion router, and the name gives you a clue. It's all about layering. When you send data using Tor, it gets wrapped in layers of encryption, like, well, an onion, and it's routed through multiple servers, each peeling off one layer before it gets to the final destination.
Oh, so that's what makes it so anonymous. Like, it bounces around so much no one can trace it back to you?
Exactly. Your identity, your location, all of that is concealed because of this complex routing process. It's clever and remarkably effective. It's why people use Tor for privacy, not just criminal activity, as it's so often portrayed.
Right. Let's talk about that for a second. Because people think the dark web is just, well, illegal stuff, don't they?
That's a common misconception, yes. In reality, the majority of traffic on the Tor network actually isn't connected to the dark web at all. In fact, dark web usage forms only about 3% of Tor's overall traffic.
Wait, only 3%?
Yep. The rest includes perfectly legitimate uses like secure communications for journalists, activists, even government agencies. And even within the dark web itself, you'll find things like whistleblower platforms and support forums for privacy advocates, not just dodgy marketplaces.
So, it's not just all shadowy deals and cybercrime. A lot of it seems to be about protecting anonymity then?
That's right. The dark web offers a safe haven for people in situations where privacy is a matter of safety. Think political dissidents or investigative journalists working in repressive regimes. It's a tool, really, and like any tool, how it's used depends entirely on the user.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. But we can't ignore the illegal stuff either, can we?
No, we can't, and we'll get to that later. But for now, it's important to remember the full picture. The dark web isn't overwhelmingly sinister. It's complex, nuanced even, and while, yes, some of it can make headlines for all the wrong reasons, there's also a lot that flies under the radar because it's simply too routine or non-controversial to notice.
So far, we've looked at the complexity and legitimate uses of the dark web. But, as we hinted earlier, there is a side of it that grabs those unsettling headlines. The darker criminal ecosystem. Let's start by talking about marketplaces. These platforms, like the infamous Silk Road, essentially operated as black markets hosted online.
Oh, Silk Road. That's the name that always comes up, isn't it? It almost feels like a piece of dark web lore at this point.
Absolutely. Created in 2011, Silk Road was one of the first functioning dark web marketplaces, and it operated like a black market version of eBay. You could find pretty much anything: illegal drugs, forged documents, even hacking services. Transactions were conducted using Bitcoin, which provided a level of anonymity, making it perfect for this sort of thing.
Hang on though, Bitcoin leaves a record, doesn't it?
Right you are. Every Bitcoin transaction is logged on the blockchain, which is a public ledger. But the key here is that users' identities can remain hidden if they take steps to anonymize their transactions. Pair Bitcoin with something like Tor, and voila, anonymity most of the time.
So it's not foolproof, but it sure makes things trickier for law enforcement.
Exactly, and we've seen this play out time and again. For instance, Authorities managed to shut down Silk Road in 2013, but that didn't stop other marketplaces from springing up to replace it. It's become a bit like a game of whack-a-mole.
Right, so it wasn't the end of the story at all. And it sounds like the scale of activity here is massive.
It is. In fact, nearly 56.8% of content on the dark web is classified as illicit. A significant portion of this includes things like illicit drugs, hacking tools, and stolen data. And then there's the darker end of the spectrum, such as child exploitation networks.
Yeah, like that horrible case with Playpen, wasn't it?
Exactly. Playpen was a particularly disturbing example. It was one of the largest child pornography sites ever hosted on the dark web, with more than 200,000 registered users. The FBI took it down in 2015, but cases like these underline just how much of a challenge this space presents.
I mean, it's horrifying, but it's also massive in scale, isn't it? Like, this isn't just a few bad actors. It's a whole network of operations.
That's the thing. These criminal ecosystems are incredibly organised and often difficult to penetrate. And unfortunately, it's not just individuals operating here. Extremist groups have also leveraged the dark web, using its anonymity to fundraise and communicate.
Wait, fundraise? Are we talking about things like cryptocurrencies?
We are. Cryptocurrencies, particularly Bitcoin, have played a pivotal role. These groups can collect donations anonymously, which they then use to purchase weaponry or even pay for recruitment campaigns.
Do we know how often this happens? Or is it more, speculation?
Unfortunately, it's very real. One well-documented case involved a man named Ahmed Sasa, who was charged with trying to buy explosives and sniper services for terrorist activities, all through the dark web. And that's just one example of many.
Wow. I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing, isn't it? This entire hidden economy just operating silently beneath the surface.
It really is. The dark web's anonymity and global reach make it a particularly challenging space to tackle, both legally and operationally. But that very same anonymity is also what protects countless individuals who aren't doing anything wrong. It's a paradox, really.
As we've seen, the dark web hosts a tangled network of criminal activities, taking advantage of its anonymity. But just as it provides a shield for these activities, it also throws a gauntlet down for law enforcement. Let's dig into how authorities tackle this ever-shifting landscape, where privacy and crime intersect.
I can only imagine. I mean, with all that encryption bouncing data around, it must make the usual tracking methods completely useless, right?
Exactly. Traditional methods like tracking IP addresses don't work here. Law enforcement has to get really creative, from analysing transaction patterns to infiltrating networks. It's almost like putting together a puzzle where you have no picture to guide you.
But there have been some big wins on their side, haven't there?
Oh, absolutely. One standout example is Interpol's operations. They've dismantled major platforms and saved countless victims in the process. For instance, they've taken down large-scale child exploitation networks and tracked criminal marketplaces to their roots.
That must have involved so much international collaboration. I mean, these activities aren't confined to just one country, are they?
Precisely. The dark web knows no borders, which means law enforcement agencies must work together across nations. Interpol and other organisations have become key players, pooling resources, expertise, and even developing strategies unique to this digital frontier.
Right, and I heard they've had to train officers specifically for this, haven't they?
They have. Interpol offers specialised dark web training programs, teaching officers how to navigate platforms like Tor and conduct simulated takedowns. It's about understanding the technical landscape, but also learning to anticipate how these networks evolve.
It's also intricate, but it gives you hope, doesn't it? That there are people out there dedicating their time to untangling these webs and keeping people safe.
It really does. And it's a constant race, advancing the tools and the training to even keep up with the methods criminals adopt. But the effort is relentless, and incremental wins like rescuing victims or removing harmful content are game changers.
It's amazing. So, after everything we've talked about, the anonymity, the marketplaces, and now the law enforcement side, what's the key takeaway for our listeners?
I'd say it's understanding this duality. The dark web is a tool. It's not inherently good or bad. It can protect and it can harm. But tackling its challenges requires nuanced approaches, global collaboration, and constant vigilance. And of course, being informed is the first step for all of us.
Couldn't agree more. It's been such an eye-opener to explore all this, and hopefully our listeners feel the same way.
On that note, thank you for joining us for this journey into the complex world of the dark web. Stay curious, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.
Bye for now.